I don't fight for money. I fight for legacy. I fight for history. And I fight for my people. Khabib Nurmagomedov, undefeated at the UFC with a record of 29-0. I've never been much of a sports guy, but I've always been fascinated with the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, where fighters sacrifice mind, body, and soul in search for glory of winning some of the biggest and most competitive fighting competitions in mixed martial arts in the world. And I've learned so many lessons from watching those late Saturday night fights that I've applied to all of my presentations, which is exactly why in this week's episode of MasterTalk, we're covering the 3 lessons I learned from the UFC that apply to every single presentation. Hey everyone, Brendan here from MasterTalk on your go-to channel to mastering your talk. And today we're talking UFC. So let's get into it. Number 1, don't be afraid to share your true colors with the world. Do you know anyone who likes beige? Not that I know of. Nobody in the world's favorite color is beige. And in the same way, some of the best fighters in the UFC, whether it was Conor McGregor or Ronda Rousey, or all of the incredible people in the UFC, they have personalities. They have unique ways of approaching not just the sport, but in the way that they showcase their brand. And even if many of these fighters are controversial, that is what leads to superfans. And this is why, regardless of where some of these great legends fight in the world, fans from across the world fly out, take trains, do whatever they can to get there and watch the fight. And there's a lot we can learn there when it comes to presentations. Because when we choose to share our uniqueness with the world, our true colors, there's some people who won't really like what we do, but others who will absolutely fall in love with us. Kevin Kelly refers to this as 1,000 true fans, the people who will do anything to support you and see you grow. And my perspective has always been, especially watching incredible UFC names and fighters, that we want to aspire to be like them from a personal branding perspective. So don't be shy to share your true colors, because if you do that, you'll attract amazing superfans who will support you on your dream to the top. But remember, never be beige, because nobody likes beige. Number 2, pressure is a lot like caviar. It's an acquired taste, so get used to it. This is a quote from Israel Adesanya, who's one of the UFC's world champions. And he said this in an interview with Joe Rogan. You know, Joe, whenever we think about caviar, some people really don't like it, and for others, it's an acquired taste. And he equates that to high-pressure environments and situations. Most people don't really thrive when there's high pressure. They get stressed out, they worry, so when times get tough, they start to break. Whereas high performers, especially in the environment that Israel fights in, those high-pressure situations, you thrive in, you get excited by them, and you use pressure as a strength, as a tool, as a weapon to make yourself more successful. It's perception at the end of the day. But in the UFC, this is extended in multiples of 10 or even 100, because fighters who are entering the ring are literally risking their lives to fight in this sport. And the reason this analogy is so powerful in public speaking communication is, well, one, it's a lot less painful. You don't have to risk your life to give a presentation through video or in public. But the other piece is the pressure that we have when we're scared about presenting. If we learn to apply that pressure and enjoy it in the same way a small group of people enjoy caviar, we'll find a lot more success. So for me, when I feel pressured or stressed that I need to deliver something, I see it as a good thing because it means the presentation actually matters. If I wasn't feeling stressed at all, it means the presentation I'm about to give isn't really going to change that many lives. Whereas if the pressure is high, If I'm really feeling nervous, it means that this moment is really important and I need to take it more seriously. I need to prepare more. I need to practice more. And I need to do the reps in the same way that many UFC fighters prepare for years before even entering the sport. So that's the key. Think of pressure like caviar as an acquired taste and start getting used to it. Finally, number 3, think of your communication journey in decades rather than days. Using Israel again as an example, he said during his interview with Joe Rogan that he could have joined the UFC in his early 20s, but he waited so many years before actually entering that sport. Why? Because he realized that if he joined the UFC too early, he would have lost and not became or lasted as one of the greatest in the cage. And this is interesting because Israel's focus was always on not being the youngest champion who ever lived, but being the best champion who ever lived. So by thinking about his career in decades, he was able to plan out, strategize his career like many successful UFC fighters to be successful when the moment was right. And that analogy applies in everything we do in life, especially in the context of communication. Because communication is a lifelong journey. It's not something we master overnight. And Joe Rogan's probably the best example of that. It's not that he just started his podcast and became really successful. He spent decades working on his communication skills to build up the muscle to then nail the podcast that he ended up starting that ended up becoming number 1. That same idea applies in the way we think about it. Just because we're building some momentum with communication doesn't mean we've reached the finish line. We need to always stay focused on what's the next step. What's the bigger vision for our life? And how does communication play into that? So here's a quick exercise you can do to achieve this. Write down your 3 biggest life goals in the world. Right now, is it to have children? Is it to be a big YouTube celebrity? Is it to start an album? Write those 3 goals and then ask yourself a simple question. How does communication play into these 3 lifelong goals? And the more you start to ponder that, the more that you'll start to see your communication journey in decades, not days. I don't fight for the money. I fight for my legacy, my history, and my people. Khabib Nurmagomedov. The idea of the UFC is how can we bring together some of the best fighters on the planet to determine who is really the champion. And if we all started to adopt that same mindset in our communication journeys, we'll be championship level communicators too. So I encourage you to adopt that mindset so that one day your message will be so powerful that the world is ready to hear it. As always, if you enjoyed this week's episode of MasterTalk, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well to see more videos like this. And if you know one person who's a fan of the UFC, send them this video so that they'll be one step closer to becoming a world champion in communication. Take care. See you next time, everyone.